Oklahoma's been crushing the transfer portal, and they might not be done.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. If we're talking Sooners, we're bringing on John Williams, of course, co-host of Locked On Oklahoma Sooners here at the network. And Oklahoma's just caught my eye, John, because I look at the moves they're making compared to our last conversation about spring football, and I go, boy, it looks like they're doing all the right things. How are you interpreting what they've done?
Yeah, they don't have a whole lot of portal needs this offseason because Brent Venables and his coaching staff have done a really good job of building the depth chart through the recruiting ranks and over the last couple portal cycles. But this offseason, they've really done a great job hitting the high notes in where they needed to add talent. And even at a position like wide receiver, where most people felt like they were pretty good and they had a really great depth chart, but added a dynamic weapon in the offseason as well.
Yeah, and I think that the last time we spoke, we were talking offensive line, and that's kind of one of the big questions surrounding Oklahoma going into 2024 is you've got Jackson Arnold at quarterback. Okay, he's talented and unproven, but they're not the only team dealing with that. But it's a brand new offensive line up front, and then they go out and make a notable addition from the Lone Star State.
Yeah, so they've had a couple of really important additions this offseason in the portal. Fabechi Wiwu out of North Texas was a freshman All-American and All-AAC addition, an ascending player at offensive line. He's really solidified right guard through the spring. But then just this week, they added Branson Hickman, another member of the AAC All-Conference team from 2023. At center, this is a very, very experienced dude, got over 2,400 snaps to his ledger, over 30 starts, and just helps to, again, solidify that offensive line interior. They've got some young guys that they really like that are developing, but they're just maybe not quite there just yet. A Josh Bates, who had taken over for Troy Everett at center after Everett was injured in spring ball. Bates has impressed. He's improved a lot since being a true freshman a year ago. Now, maybe he's just not quite ready to take on the SEC in 2024, but again, a developing player. But Branson Hickman really just comes in with a ton of experience, a guy that was just sold on the idea of coming to Oklahoma, playing for Coach Bill Bedenbaugh, and it does help to solidify and answer some of the questions and maybe some of the concerns about offensive line heading into 2024.
Yeah, he comes over from SMU where he had back-to-back all-conference seasons with the Mustangs, and certainly that's been a successful program, and Rhett Lashley, I'm sure he's not very happy to see a guy like that go, but that's the spring transfer portal window right now. And I think that move in particular is one that turned some heads because you went, oh, okay, if their offensive line is solid, well, then it's just going to be on Jackson Arnold. Because if you've only got one question to answer instead of two, last time I checked, I'm not a math major, one is fewer than two, and that can make you feel better about what a team has going into 2024. But they might not be done in the transfer portal because they've also been tied to one of maybe the biggest name, at least on the defensive line in the transfer portal right now. You get Chris Hardy out of Jacksonville State. That's a big name that'll attract plenty of attention as well. But Dominic Williams from TCU, again, an all-conference guy, has played a couple of seasons with the Horned Frogs. Oklahoma's been tied to him, and they had him on for a visit last week.
Yeah, and by all accounts, the visit went great. He stayed in Norman until about 7 o'clock at night, according to George Stoy of Sooner Scoop. And Oklahoma hit all the high notes. The family loved, Todd Bates, Brent Venables, the staff, the culture. Everybody was a fan. There's a connection to the coaching staff from before, his time even at TCU. But he's going to go on his visits, and this is kind of a staple of the Brent Venables era. Is hey, just because a guy leaves campus without a commitment, don't overreact. He's going to go visit with Texas, which is always going to kind of move the needle with prospects from across the country because it's Texas and they always do a really good job in recruiting. But I don't think that this should damper anybody's optimism about Dominic Williams landing with the Sooners. I think this is just going to be kind of the process that plays out. And by the end of this, I'm still feeling pretty optimistic and pretty confident that Oklahoma's going to land him. Now, if they do, I mean, it adds to an already improved defensive tackle group. Dejon Terry was a really good nose tackle for him last year, helped really solidify their short yardage run game. But you've got an ascending player in Grayson Halton that'll play more of that 3 technique defensive tackle, rushing the passer, plays with a lot of quickness, athleticism, and they really, really like what they've got in true freshmen Jaden Jackson and David Stone. But again, they're true freshmen. Are they going to be ready to contribute 300-400 snaps this season? Probably not, but adding a guy like Dominic Williams helps. But they also added former Arizona State defensive tackle and Louisville defensive tackle Jermaine Lowell. I got a commitment from him Monday night, and that's another big-time addition. Back at Arizona State as a sophomore, had over 70 total tackles, had 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, but dealt with the injury bug from 2020 to 2023. 2023 was his first full season back. So getting him, if they can still add Dominic Williams, I mean, that defensive tackle group is now really, really formidable heading into that first season in the SEC, where you have to be good up front and in the interior.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that you have to be better in the trenches than you do in the Big 12 when you're playing in the SEC. It sounds like common sense, and that's because it is. It's just they are better in that league, and I think you saw Texas last year emerge out of the Big 12 because it felt like they were kind of preparing for the SEC with the way they had NFL guys on the defensive line, the way that their offensive line played as well. But I thought particularly that defensive front was really, really key to Texas making a push to the college football playoff last year. But what else has Oklahoma been able to do in the transfer portal, John? You told me about a guy, Deion Burks, that's coming in. What does he bring to the table?
Yeah, so everybody was really excited about Deion Burks when he did commit to Oklahoma out of Purdue. You look at his numbers from Purdue, not super efficient, but again, what are we talking about at the quarterback position? What are we talking about with other weapons on that offense? Is he getting favorable matchups, favorable looks? Probably not very likely. Well, he came in through winter workouts, through spring ball, and has done nothing but impress everybody. When Brent Venables was talking about him after the spring game, he talked about his work ethic. He talked about just the way he attacked the weight room and has led kind of by example. And it reminds me a little bit of a guy like Jalen Hurts. You know, Jalen Hurts came in as a big-time transfer addition. Everybody was really excited about the potential, but what caught everybody's eye early on was just the way that he attacked the weight room. And Deion Burks did nothing but live up to the hype in the spring game. 5 catches, 174 receiving yards, touchdowns of 64 and 50 yards, all in the first half, showing off a really good connection with Jackson Arnold. And they just barely missed on another big play. It was a throw that was just outside of his fingertips. And he looks the part, man. He looks the part of a guy that's going to be very, very explosive. I likened him to a former Oklahoma Sooners receiver, D.D. Westbrook, who was one of the best wide receivers during his era at Oklahoma. And I think he's got that kind of big play potential for the Sooners, but he shows the ability to win in the short, intermediate, and deep passing game, which you're going to have to be able to do that. Takes over for Drake Stoops in the slot that had a career year last year. So if you kind of extrapolate some of those things, I mean, you could be in for a big time season from Deion Burks because he's just a more explosive player than Drake Stoops. Drake, great, able to get open at will at times and does a lot with maybe not having the most explosive athleticism. Well, you bring a guy like Deion Burks in, who a lot of people likened him to maybe a future first round NFL draft pick, but has that explosiveness, has the speed, has the route running ability to really be a dynamic player for the Sooners. And he showed it in the spring game on Saturday.
Yeah, and having early chemistry with your young freshman quarterback as a wide receiver, that's exactly what you were hoping for when somebody comes in via the transfer portal. So if Oklahoma is able to land Dominic Williams, it would just continue to be one heck of a cycle for the Sooners over there in Norman. John Williams, Locked On Oklahoma Sooners. Check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. John, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Don't forget about Ole Miss. Just don't. I'll tell you why. Before we get to Lane Kiffin and company, this episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's a guarantee. Lock 100%. Your team winning on Saturdays this fall, Not a guarantee. This absolutely is $150 whether you win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So the next thing you need to do is ask yourself this question. What are you waiting for? I don't know either. Make it happen. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. Has Ole Miss done enough to fully replace Quinshon Judkins? They've got Henry Parrish and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and we have got Steven Willis of Locked On Ole Miss joining me here on Locked On College Football today. Not surprising after the Judkins departure up to Ohio State to see the Rebels going out to get some running backs, Steven. Are they done at this position now?
No, I don't think they are done at this position. They've added 2 players in the spring transfer portal window, and I do expect them to add a thumper, a big body type, a 4-minute offense type is somebody that Ole Miss is going to potentially bring in. This is really interesting, Spencer, to me, because if anybody's seen the movie Moneyball, Lane Kiffin is basically doing Moneyball in the replacement of Quinshon Judkins. They are literally trying to replace this player in the aggregate. And so they've added Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. They've added Henry Parrish, who is actually coming back to Ole Miss. And hopefully between all 3 players, once they add the big back, they will add nearly 200 carries, nearly 1,200 yards, and probably 15 touchdowns and replace what Quinshon Judkins gave Ole Miss.
Is there another first baseman like Giambi? No, there's not. And if there was, could we afford him? No. Then what the are you talking about, man? One of the greatest lines in my favorite sports movie of all time. I love that you brought that up. That's why we bring him back, folks, just for the Moneyball references. But we'll get a little bit later into Ole Miss's transfer portal class at a glance and why they don't have many other needs here. But let's talk about the newcomers that they have brought in, because replacing a guy of Quinshon Judkins' caliber is certainly not an easy thing to do. But let's start with Henry Parrish, the transfer from Miami. What do you expect to get from him in this pass-heavy attack from Lane Kiffin?
Well, this is actually something that Ole Miss fans know exactly what they're going to get with Henry Parrish, because he was here for 2 years before he went to Miami. He was the running back that played behind Matt Corral. He's never played with Jackson Dart, so that'll be a new thing. But I think you can expect 100 carries, probably 650 yards, maybe 5 to 7 touchdowns. I think that's the goal that they want with Henry Parrish Jr. And whenever you have another back like Ulysses Bentley IV, who is coming back, he's kind of an incumbent. If you look back to what that Ole Miss running back room was like with Matt Corral in 2020 and 2021, Ulysses Bentley IV is kind of a plus Jerry and Ely type running back anyway. So what you're looking for now, and I know you've added the Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but what you're looking for is that thumper, that big back, that Snoop Connor rolled running back. Ole Miss had a visit on campus earlier this week in Trent Howland from Indiana. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. He would fit the bill perfectly. But I think Ole Miss could potentially take three running backs this spring portal cycle.
Yeah, I don't think that is something we've seen really anywhere else. You see one, that's common, 2 every now and then, but a third running back, when you have an offense that is very much run through the quarterback, and Jackson Dart has got pretty short preseason Heisman odds, I think deservedly so. I have liked him since he was at USC, and he and Lane Kiffin obviously fit very well together off an 11-win campaign and a New Year's Six Bowl victory last year for the Rebels. But how important is getting a 4th running back to work into this rotation?
I think it's imperative, honestly. Kevin Smith, the running back coach at Ole Miss, he likes to rotate 3 different backs. That's something we learned very early in the Lane Kiffin era. 3 running backs is kind of what he goes. They do the hot hand thing for the first 2 quarters, and then the 4th quarter, whichever one's the freshest, they just put that running back in to go kind of batter the defense. I think a 4th running back, and honestly, really, it's a 5th running back whenever you look at Kedrick Reesano, who is a freshman returning back as well. So we'll see how it goes in the fall, but I think it's important for the run game at Ole Miss, who has been either 1st, 2nd, or 3rd in all of Lane Kiffin's years, to kind of get right, because that run game is what's going to make Jackson Dart the prolific player that we think he is. Jackson Dart's going to put up Heisman level numbers because of the run game, not just because of Trey Harris and Juice Wells and those guys on the outside. You need to have the linebackers genuinely worried about coming forward to stop the run, and that opens up everything behind them.
So Henry Parrish and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in the room at the running back position, but are there any other transfer targets that you've seen that you think could enhance Ole Miss's chances to not just make the playoff, but compete for a national championship?
I go back and forth on that one. With early in the spring, like Princely Emanuelin had to have shoulder surgery. And people were wondering about his recovery timeline and all of that stuff. Does Ole Miss need an edge? And is that edge Tyler Barron, who was one time committed to Ole Miss, ended up at Louisville? It looks like Barron is going to end up back in the transfer portal. And I've heard rumors for probably 6 weeks about Tyler Barron. So when it's over, I'll be glad that it's over. And either way, I just don't want to hear the rumors anymore. But he's a good player on the edge. He provides that little quick twitch spark that Ole Miss needs in the pass rush game, especially if they want to compete with somebody like Georgia, somebody like Alabama, the big boys in the SEC. And if Ole Miss wants to win a national title and an SEC title and all of that stuff, they need to.
Yeah, and I think that for Ole Miss, they've had a really, really good portal offseason. It's been, somewhat quiet compared to what others are doing so far here in the spring transfer portal window. But, adding a guy like Tyler Barron, sure, you take somebody like that. You're not going to turn down a guy of that caliber if you're the Rebels in this spot. But let's also be able to take a step back here, Steven, and remember who currently has the top-ranked transfer portal class in all of college football. And that, Steven, for those on podcast, has got his hand raised right there because it's Ole Miss. It's Ole Miss ahead of Texas A&M, ahead of Oregon, ahead of Colorado. At least, you can interpret those metrics however you'd like. But certainly Ole Miss has had a great influx of talent. Who are those key transfers that college football fans shouldn't forget just because they don't, generate as much buzz because they're not new in the spring window?
The front 7 transfers that Ole Miss got. Princely Emanuelin, possibly one of the best pass rushers in all of college football. Walter Nolan, a former number 1 recruit in the whole country, transferred in from Texas A&M. And Pooh Paul, keep your eye on Pooh Paul. He played ball at Arkansas. Chris Paul is a really great linebacker. He's 240 pounds, can go sideline to sideline, and is willing to get in there and get physical with people. And playing behind Princely Emanuel and Walter Nolan, and Ole Miss is returning J.J. Pegues and Jared Ivey. That's going to take up a lot of blocks and allow him to run around. I think he can wreak some havoc this year.
One thing that has drawn criticism for those who are not big fans of Colorado is that they don't recruit the high school ranks, and they're just trying to build their roster through the transfer portal. And I was actually interacting with someone who listens to the show the other day who was saying, well, you can't just do it through the portal. You have to have this, and they're not going to be able to get better in time. I think ideally, when you hear coaches talk about roster building, it still is a majority done from the high school ranks. Colorado's certainly taking a different approach, but they improved from 2022 to 2023. That's not even arguable in any sense of the term. Does Ole Miss have that ingrained talent where the portal guys are, oftentimes high-end players, but they're supplementing what is already a good foundational football team?
I think they have a pretty good system at Ole Miss. And what Ole Miss does in high school recruiting is the top end of their class that has always been there, the 4- and 5-star and high-level 3-star players, they're still getting recruited by Ole Miss, somewhere between 10 and 15 recruits every single year. But those other 10 players that we all remember, Spencer, those program guys that you brought in back in the day, the bottom end of the class, the class fillers, Ole Miss doesn't take those. Those are transfer portal spots in this new era. But those top level, Quinshon Judkins was a high school player. Suntaran Perkins, a 5-star. Cam Franklin is going to likely play a little bit this year. If you are good enough, Lane Kiffin will play you. It's not an age type situation. So we will see. I mean, Ole Miss is getting all the headlines in the world about being transfer portal. They're getting pretty, not necessarily elite, but very, very good high school talent as well.
Steven Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. Always a great time to have you by in the show. Thanks, Steven.
All right, bud.
Notre Dame has been quiet in the transfer portal. Is that okay? We'll talk about that next. First, we talk about our friends at Monopoly Go. So I have a competitive side. I'm a competitive person. It's just the way I'm wired. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations. You build up amazing cities. You get the big money bringing into yourself. But the best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly, but you can also heist their vaults of riches for yourself, and the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon truly is. It's not just your competitive side that's going to like this, though. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, just like I have, on this very device right here. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. This episode also brought to you by our friends at Game Time. So, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. You can save up to 60%, which is more than half, on buying last-minute tickets for select sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Notre Dame has been very quiet in the transfer portal here in the spring window. Does that mean they're just ready to compete? Tyler Wojak, Locked On Notre Dame, joining me here on the show. Is that what it means, Tyler? Has there not been any buzz at this point because Notre Dame doesn't need to make any moves, or have they just not made any moves yet?
I think they haven't made any moves yet. Now, for one, they have 88 scholarship players currently. So it's not like they have a ton of room on their roster. They lost a cornerback to the transfer portal on Tuesday, and that was just a guy who was pretty deep on the depth chart. His name's Micah Bell. Didn't really have a role on this year's team, and it didn't look like he was going to project to get much playing time in the future. A couple of things they do need, I think most notably a punter, believe it or not, because they just lost their punter to the transfer portal and they don't really have anyone else. So that's the first thing. They need to add a punter. They also, I think I would really prefer if they added an offensive tackle, but offensive tackles are pretty hard to come by in the transfer portal. But other than that, I really don't think they need a ton. I already mentioned the fact that they're already over the scholarship limit. I feel like throughout the roster, positions are strong. They're deep. They don't really need anyone, but I think an offensive tackle is crucial. A cornerback would be nice just for depth purposes, and a punter is absolutely necessary. And I expect them to make some moves here in the near future now that spring practice is officially over.
Yeah, they've only added 8 players in the transfer portal in this 2024 cycle. Now, Notre Dame, of course, recruits well, and that's been the case for the last couple of seasons under Marcus Freeman. They've had 18 players depart the transfer portal. Now, if I were trying to be in the clickbait world, Tyler, I could spin that as Notre Dame portal disaster. -10 in the portal. It's all a mess. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask you in a more critical manner, why do you think that is the case?
Well, there's a couple things at play here. I would say, for one, Notre Dame and undergraduate transfers. And when I say Notre Dame, I'm referring to the University of Notre Dame. It's a lot harder for an undergraduate transfer to get into Notre Dame because of the academic restrictions that they place on transfers. I actually transferred into Notre Dame after my freshman year of college, so I can actually speak to that from my own personal experience. And I can tell you that when you're trying to transfer to Notre Dame, it's a lot harder than at any other school, not just because of the academic requirements in terms of grades, GPA, test scores, all that stuff. I'm talking about your curriculum. Like, what classes are you taking? Because they have a first year of studies program that is a little bit different than most schools. So that really is an impediment a lot when Notre Dame is looking to add undergraduate transfers. They basically have to be going into their sophomore year, or they have to be grad transfers. So the door is more open for players to leave than for guys to come in. So I think that's one thing. And I also think another thing, too, is Marcus Freeman has prioritized high school recruiting since the moment he became the head coach at Notre Dame. And I think he's elevated recruiting as much as he possibly can. They're still not in like the top 5. And I think a big part of that is the fact that Notre Dame really doesn't hand out a ton of NIL money to high school recruits. They're happy to give it to guys who've been in the program or transfers. I mean, Riley Leonard and Sam Hartman got a big old bag to come to Notre Dame. So it's not like they won't do it. It's just the way that they prioritize it has more to do with the older guys than the high school recruits. So I just think that with the way that they've recruited, they have a lot of guys. They don't have a ton of needs, and it's just a little bit harder for them to add people, especially undergraduates.
So a couple things. First of all, Keelan Crimmins from Mississippi State is the highest rated punter available in the transfer portal right now, according to our friends over at 24/7 Sports. He entered in the spring window the day it opened on April 16th. I'm just saying that might be the guy pinning everybody deep. Somebody's got to win the Ray Guy Award. That's the punting award, right? That the that the Iowa punter wins every year, of course. Second, Tyler with the very subtle and humble flex that I picked up on about his academic prowess, saying that he's able to transfer into Notre Dame. They've got these very tough requirements, and I did it personally, and I'm willing to bet myself and 90% of our audience wouldn't be able to do that. I don't know if everybody else caught that, but I definitely.
Hey, all I'll say about that is the reason I transferred in is because I wasn't good enough the first time. They denied me, so I'll humble myself a little bit. So they didn't like me enough the first time, and I think I just begged them and annoyed them so much, referring to the admissions department. They're like, finally, just let this dude in, so I'll leave us alone. So it's a lot.
Persistence.
I would say it's a lot less of a brag than you might think.
You can sell that as a story of persistence, which is what I would advise, or you can sell it as a story of I just annoyed them so much they said, fine, just make him go away. Make him go away. But the thing with Notre Dame in the portal is it's not as easy as other places, but it doesn't feel like it's as restrictive as some spots. Like Northwestern can be tough. Stanford is really the quintessential example. Like Stanford can recruit high school kids at a pretty high level. If things are going right, they can pull in top 20, top 30 classes, but their university won't let them add transfers. And I just wonder if that's going to allow them to compete. I don't think that is a hurdle at Notre Dame the way that it is at Stanford. Am I correct in thinking that?
I agree with you. I think that what Troy Taylor is going up against at Stanford is much different than the case at Notre Dame. Like, as difficult as it is for some guys to get into Notre Dame, they'll make some exceptions, but Stanford is just playing an entirely different ballgame. And it's sad because Notre Dame-Stanford is a rivalry, but I still like when Stanford is fun and they're competitive. I mean, the David Shaw, Jim Harbaugh days feel like an eternity ago, and it's really hard for me to imagine them ever getting back to that so long as they have these policies regarding the transfer portal.
Yeah, I think it is tough. And as an Oregon guy myself, I have fond memories of peak Stanford. That was a vibe. The farm was not always empty. They used to pack the farm when Stanford was not so much the case anymore. But bringing this back to Notre Dame, they have added 8 players from the transfer portal, all in the first window. We'll see if they add any more as the spring window progresses. But who are the guys, maybe 1 or 2, that are new via the portal this year for Notre Dame that you're looking at to make an impact for the Irish this year?
Well, Riley Leonard's the biggest one, obviously, the quarterback from Duke. But his time at Notre Dame so far has been really interesting because he actually suffered a pretty significant injury on his last play against Notre Dame last fall. They were trying to score. Notre Dame had just come back to take the lead with under a minute left. Riley Leonard got sacked, fell down awkwardly, really messed up his ankle, had to leave the game in crutches. And then he tried to come back. He was never really healthy. They eventually had to shut him down for the rest of the 2023 season. Then he comes to Notre Dame, misses the start of winter workouts because he finally got surgery to repair that ankle. And then he was out there for the start of spring practice. And then he had to have another surgery on that same ankle because there were some complications from the previous one involving a stress fracture. I don't know all the medical details, but it forced him to miss the remainder of spring practice. So he is the guy. He is the quarterback that is definitely going to start when Notre Dame heads to College Station for the season opener. But up to this point, Notre Dame fans and the coaches really haven't been able to see a whole lot from him. So I still have a ton of questions about him. I want to be optimistic, but it's one of those things where I got to believe it I got to see it and then I'll believe it. As for someone else, I would say that, they added a couple of receivers in the transfer portal that they desperately needed. Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, Jane Harrison. I imagine at least one of those guys will make an impact. But I'm going to go to the defensive side. Another Duke transfer, oddly enough. RJ Oben. He had 5 sacks last year for the Blue Devils. He is going to start for Notre Dame at the strong side end position. He can get after the passer. He had a sack and a forced fumble in the spring game. So it looks like 2 Duke guys are going to be key players on Notre Dame this year. And I guess they are kind of like-minded universities and everyone else hates him for reasons that I understand, by the way. I totally get it. So I'm not going to try to fight back at all. But it is kind of funny how it all worked out.
Yeah, and that opening week game at Texas A&M, one of the headline matchups in week 1 of the college football season. I mean, when the summer months roll around, I think we'll be diving into that very heavily here on the show because we'll finally be able to kind of have a countdown and look forward to real college football being played. But the closest thing we get this time of year, of course, are spring games. And Notre Dame had theirs recently. How did Riley Leonard look?
He wasn't able to play in the game, but he did this thing that was a little bit interesting to me. So I feel like the term mental reps gets thrown around a lot, right? Like, oh, he's injured, but he was taking mental reps. That means he was physically there, but he wasn't really doing anything. No, Riley Leonard was standing about 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He had his uniform on. He had a brace on his ankle. He could move around. Marcus Freeman said that if it were an actual game, Riley Leonard probably would have been able to play. I'm not really sure I'm buying that. But for this blue and gold game, he sat back and he would literally go through the play as if he was the quarterback, like dropping back, reading the defense, making decisions. That was pretty weird, but I give him credit for doing everything he could to show the rest of the team that, hey, man, he really cares. He wants to be out there so badly. And even though he can't be a full-blown participant, he's going to try to get as much out of it as he possibly can. So that just goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, it's cool that he's out there, that he's trying his best, but obviously you'd much rather see him out there. But the other quarterbacks behind him looked really good, including true freshman CJ Carr, who is, borderline 5-star recruit coming out of high school, the grandson of Lloyd Carr, the former Michigan head coach who won a national championship. Ton of reasons to be excited about him. He had a really good spring practice, as did a couple other guys. So Riley Leonard's probably looking around like, man, I can't be out for too long because these guys are coming.
Exciting times in South Bend, Indiana. I almost forgot the city where Notre Dame is, but fun fact, I have been to that campus to call a game once before. When the Southern Utah women's basketball team made the NCAA tournament, we flew out to South Bend, and I got to tell you, I was indeed legitimately impressed. Everything.
What month?
That was in March of 2023.
Okay. All right, yeah. Good thing you didn't go in like February. January,
oh, believe me, we got the sense that we were walking around the campus at night, and I was just thinking to myself, boy, I bet this thing is bitter in December and January. Yeah. Bitter.
March is like starting to clear up. It gets really pretty. The springtime is great, but yeah, man, if you went during like the middle of February when the sun hasn't been out and like 64 straight days or something like that, you'd probably be like, I don't really get it here. But you probably got it on a good day, and I'm glad you
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good enough. I'm from Oregon, so anything that's not raining, like even if it is raining, it's not so bad. Tyler Wojak, Locked On Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Tyler, thanks for coming by.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.